do not simply disappear. They grow. They get sick. They reach school age. They leave traces in the world around them, or at least they are supposed to. That is what makes the allegations surrounding one rural Ohio home so difficult to process. Linus. According to investigators and public reporting, 16 children, from toddlers to an 18-year-old, were found in conditions authorities described as disturbing. Some reportedly required immediate medical attention. Others, as were said, developmental or educational limitations. There were also questions about whether they had regular contact with the institutions that normally make childhood visible: schools, doctors, neighbors, public records. How can 16 lives become almost invisible? Dang. One distinction matters. We have to separate what authorities have stated, what reports suggest, and what remains unknown. Authorities reportedly entered the home while carrying out a search connected to another investigation: 16 children. Medical concerns. Questions about education, development, and basic care. The children were removed for medical evaluations. Some reportedly needed urgent treatment. But one detail makes the discovery even more unsettling. Investigators were not reportedly responding to an emergency call from one of the children. They found them because authorities entered the home for another reason. So, if police had not entered that day, how much longer could this have continued? Who knew the children were there? The family have with schools, doctors, agencies, or the surrounding community? And what happens now to children who may have known almost no other way of life? At first, this appears to be a story about a shocking discovery. 3 stories at once. What investigators say they found, how so many children could allegedly become so isolated, and whether the systems responsible for protecting them can now give them more than rescue: a future. Before we ask how this could happen, we have to slow the story down. Confirmed information, legal allegations, public reporting, and speculation are beginning to blur together. The next question is simple: what do we actually know? And what are people only assuming? This disturbing. The first responsibility is not to guess. It is to separate evidence from assumption, so let us build the story carefully. First, what authorities have publicly described. According to the available reporting, law enforcement entered the Ohio home while carrying out a search connected to another investigation. During that search, officers discovered 16 children living there. The children were removed and taken for medical evaluation. Some reportedly required more serious treatment, and authorities described the overall conditions inside the home in extremely strong terms. Second, what the legal record tells us. 4 adults connected to the household were charged with multiple counts of child endangering. Each has pleaded not guilty. That matters. Yes, charges are not convictions, and an active investigation is not the same thing as a final legal conclusion. It is also important not to assume that every adult in the house had the same role, the same knowledge, or the same level of responsibility. Investigators and prosecutors still have to prove. Third, what remains uncertain. We do not yet have a complete public account of how long the children lived under the reported conditions. We do not know every contact the family may have had with schools, doctors, social services, or local authorities. We do not know whether additional charges will be filed, and we do not yet know what each child may eventually be able to tell investigators. This is where many true crime stories become distorted. A disturbing fact appears, then a rumor fills the gap. Then the rumor gets repeated until people forget that it was never confirmed. That cannot happen here. The case is already serious enough without exaggeration. The evidence must remain in layers. Officials have stated what records reportedly show what investigators are still trying to establish, and what the public simply does not know. Once those layers are separated, one question becomes even harder to avoid. If the reports are accurate, the children were not only isolated inside a house, they may also have been isolated from the ordinary systems that usually make a child visible to the outside world: school, healthcare, community, public institutions. Next question is no longer only what happened behind the walls of that home. It is how those walls may have extended far beyond the house itself, because sometimes invisibility is not created by one locked door. Sometimes it is created by the absence of every outside connection that might have opened it. If the reports are accurate, the children were not only hidden by the walls of a house, they may have been hidden by something larger: a series of missing connections. The first wall is education. Schools do more than teach reading and mathematics. Teachers, counselors, nurses, classmates, and other parents all become part of a child's visible world. are absent from that world for long periods, fewer people have the opportunity to notice changes, ask questions, or recognize that something may be wrong. That does not mean every child outside a traditional school setting is in danger. Regular contact outsiders can create important opportunities for concern to be noticed. The second wall is healthcare. Doctors, nurses, other medical professionals may sometimes see signs that a neighbor or distant relative would never recognize. Growth, development, nutrition, communication, and basic health can all create a record over time. If that contact is limited, another window into a child's life may disappear. The third wall is community. Reportedly said he rarely, if ever, saw the children enter. Another reportedly remembered seeing some of them only briefly. But neighbors have limits. People can live a few feet apart and still know almost nothing about what happens inside another home. A quiet house may not look dangerous. A child who appears dirty once may simply have been playing outside. A closed door does not announce what is happening behind it. The fourth wall is information control. When one household becomes highly isolated, the people inside may depend almost entirely on one another for transportation, communication, education, food, and contact with the outside world. In that kind of environment, the adults who control access may also control what outsiders are allowed to see. Not a conclusion about this case. It is a question investigators now have to examine. And there is an important limit to what we can say. We do not yet know every contact this family may have had with government agencies. We do not know every medical visit. We do not know every school record. We do not know whether anyone raised concerns in the past. Public silence does not always mean total institutional silence, but if the reported conditions developed over years, then the central question remains. How did so many warning opportunities either fail to appear, fail to connect, or fail to produce intervention? That question may eventually be answered through records, but records can only tell part of the story. The most important evidence may come from the people who lived inside that home, the children themselves, and that creates a new problem. What happens when the most important witnesses may have difficulty explaining what happened to them? In cases like this, the most important witnesses may also be the people least prepared to explain what happened. According to the reporting surrounding the Ohio case, some of the children may have significant educational or communication limitations. That creates an extraordinary challenge for investigators. A child does not always describe time the way an adult does. They may not remember dates. They may not know what year something happened. They may describe events through seasons, birthdays, rooms, routines, or the people who were present. If isolation lasted for years, some children may not even recognize certain experiences as unusual. That does not make their memories meaningless. It means investigators have to listen differently. A single statement may be difficult to interpret. When that statement is compared with medical findings, the physical condition of the home, public records, and the accounts of other children, patterns can begin to emerge. This is one reason the perspective of retired detective Thomas Salisbury matters. Salisbury worked on the investigation involving the Turpin children, a separate case with its own facts and legal history. Described how investigators in that case had to compare what different siblings said, look for details that could be independently verified, and build a larger picture from pieces that did not always arrive in perfect order. Is not the Turpin case. The children are different. The evidence is different. The legal questions may be different, but the investigative challenge may share one important feature. The truth may not come from one perfect interview. It may come from dozens of small details slowly connecting a room, a routine, a punishment, a meal, a person who was always present, a person who was never allowed inside. One child may remember one part, another may remember something else. Investigators may have to build a timeline from fragments. That process requires patience because pressure can damage both trust and accuracy. The goal is not to force a dramatic story. The goal is to understand what the evidence can actually support. There is also another question that becomes impossible to ignore. If children survived years of isolation together, how important will those sibling relationships be now? Should keeping brothers and sisters connected become part of recovery whenever it can be done safely? Specialized care for each child come first, even if that means separation. There may be no simple answer, but history offers one warning. Removing children from one dangerous environment does not automatically guarantee that everything afterward will be safe. That is where the Turpin case becomes relevant for a reason Far more important than comparison, it changed the meaning of the word rescue. Desperate thing. Thomas Salisbury's experience matters as he has seen what can happen when children are removed from one extreme environment and placed into a system meant to protect them. The Turpin case was different from the Ohio case, different family, a different legal history, but one lesson is impossible to ignore. Rescue is not the end of the story. For children who have lived through long isolation, brothers and sisters may become more than family. They may become protectors, witnesses, and the only people who truly understand the world they survived. Salisbury has described how strong those sibling bonds could be in the Turpin family. That does not mean every sibling group should always remain together. Safety, age, and specialized care may require different arrangements. Those relationships should not be treated as an afterthought. The second lesson is harder. A new placement is not automatically a safe placement. Some of the Turpin children were later connected to serious allegations involving abuse in foster care. The systems assigned to protect them did not always prevent further harm. That history does not prove the same thing will happen in Ohio. It does prove that oversight cannot stop when the first emergency ends. A child can be removed from one house and still remain vulnerable. A complaint can be missed. Can look stable from the outside, while something different is happening behind another door. The third lesson may matter most. Recovery is not a single service. Children coming out of extreme isolation may need medical care, education, emotional support, developmental assistance, stable housing, trusted relationships, and long-term follow-up. No one professional can do all of that alone. The danger is treating the rescue as the victory. Police remove the children, the headlines explode. Melter. Then attention moves somewhere else, but the children are still there, still learning and adapting, still trying to understand a world that may feel unfamiliar. That is why the Turpin comparison matters, not because the two cases are identical, not because one predicts the other. It has shown what can happen when the world celebrates a rescue and then stops watching. For the 16 children in the Ohio investigation, the question will eventually change. At first, are they safe today? Later. Are they still safe months from now? And after that, are they being given a real chance to build a life? Removing a child from immediate danger is only the first rescue. The second rescue is helping that child learn how to live beyond it. There are two very different kinds of rescue. The first is immediate. A door opens, children are removed from danger, doctors examine them, authorities begin asking questions. That rescue can happen in a single day. The second rescue may take years. It is the work of helping a child build a life after surviving an environment that shaped almost everything they knew. For the 16 children in the Ohio case, that process may involve very different needs: medical care, developmental support, education, behavioral health services, housing, stable relationships, and long-term monitoring. No two children will necessarily need the same thing. A toddler may require one kind of support, a teenager may require another. An 18-year-old may be legally considered an adult. While still lacking the skills or independence most people associate with adulthood, legal age and practical independence are not always the same. That distinction matters. The young person has experienced severe isolation, limited education, or significant developmental challenges. Turning 18 does not suddenly create the ability to manage housing, money, healthcare, transportation, or personal safety alone. Support cannot be based only on a birthday. Then there is the question of siblings. If these children depended on one another for years, separating them without careful thought could create another form of loss. But keeping everyone together may not always be possible. Some may need specialized treatment. Some may need different levels of supervision. Some may eventually want different things. There is no easy formula. The goal should be safety without creating unnecessary new trauma. The people and institutions caring for them must be monitored. Who checks the quality of a placement after the first week? Who listens if a child struggles to communicate a concern? Who notices if a new environment begins to fail? Involved when public attention disappears? Those questions matter because recovery is not only about removing danger, it is about creating trust. A child who has spent years learning that adults cannot be trusted may not suddenly believe a new adult simply because that person has a professional title. Trust has to be earned. Routine has to be built. May have to begin far behind the level expected for a child's age. Medical problems may need long-term treatment. Ordinary experiences may feel unfamiliar. This is why the second rescue is harder to photograph. There is no dramatic police entry, no flashing lights, no single moment when everyone can declare victory. It is slower, quieter, and in many ways more important. And care teams focus on the future. Investigators still have another job. They have to reconstruct the past. And that means proving, person by person and fact by fact, what actually happened inside that home. To the public, the picture can look simple. One house, 4 adults, 16 children. But the law cannot stop there. Investigators and prosecutors have to determine individual responsibility. Who knew what? Who controlled the children's daily lives? Who had the ability to intervene? Who may have participated directly in the conditions authorities described? And did every adult in the home play the same role? Those questions matter because living under the roof does not automatically create the same level of criminal responsibility for every person inside it. According to the available reporting, the 4 adults charged in the case have pleaded not guilty. That means the allegations still have to be proven. The public may feel anger. The facts may appear deeply disturbing, but a criminal case is built through evidence, not emotion. Investigators may examine the physical condition of the home, medical findings, public records, timelines, statements from the children, and the actions of each individual adult. The challenge is separating a shared environment from individual conduct. One person may have controlled decisions, another may have followed them, another may have known more than they admitted. Another may raise a defense that changes how investigators understand the family structure. The attorney for one defendant has reportedly questioned whether his client could also have been a victim herself. That claim is not established fact. Difficult possibility investigators may have to examine. Can someone be accused of failing children while also having experienced control, coercion, or abuse within the same family system? The answer depends on evidence, not sympathy, not speculation evidence. The same is true when people ask whether more serious charges could eventually follow. They might not. That depends on what prosecutors can prove under the law. Medical records may matter. The duration of the alleged conditions may matter. The children's accounts may matter. The ability of each adult to act may matter, and the investigation may reveal facts the public does not yet know. This is why patience matters. The legal system has to move more slowly than the internet. Online can become a conclusion in hours. In court, every conclusion has to survive scrutiny. And even if prosecutors eventually build the strongest possible case, the courtroom can only answer part of this story. It can determine criminal responsibility. It can impose punishment. But it cannot decide what kind of future these children will have. That question belongs to a much longer process, because years from now, the most important outcome may not be remembered in a verdict. It may be seen in whether 16 children were given the chance to become something more than the worst thing that happened to them. 16 children do not simply disappear, and yet a child can become almost invisible when the ordinary connections to the outside slowly disappear. No school contact, little medical visibility, limited community awareness. Few opportunities for someone outside the home to ask the right question at the right time. Now, according to the reporting surrounding this case, these children have been found. They are no longer invisible. Not the same as being healed. Accountability matters. If crimes were committed, the legal system must determine responsibility based on evidence. But punishment and protection are not the same mission. A courtroom can't decide guilt. It cannot rebuild a childhood. That work happens somewhere quieter, in medical appointments, in classrooms, in stable homes, in patient conversations, in the gradual discovery that food can be reliable, adults can be trustworthy, and tomorrow does not have to look like yesterday. For some of these children, recovery may mean learning things most people take for granted. For others, it may mean rebuilding confidence, independence, or relationships. And for all of them, dignity should matter. They should not be reduced to a headline. They should not become permanent symbols of someone else's crime. They are people with futures that are still being written. That is why the real test begins after the cameras leave. Will the systems around them remain careful? Will concerns be heard? Will placements be monitored? Will siblings be supported in ways that recognize both their individual needs and the bonds they may share? It will help continue when public attention moves to the next shocking story. The first rescue removes a child from immediate danger. The second rescue gives that child the chance to build a life beyond it. That is the larger message of this case. A society should not measure success only by whether it can discover hidden suffering. It should also measure success by what happens next, by whether children are protected over time, by whether they are given education, care, privacy, stability, and the freedom to become more than what was done to them. The first question was how 16 children could become almost invisible. The question that remains is whether, now that the world has finally seen them, the world will still be watching when they need help the most. If this story stays with you, air it or share it for one reason. Attention should not end when the headline does. And if you value investigations that separate evidence from speculation and focus on the questions that truly matter, subscribe to Legendary Lives. Because sometimes the most important part of a story begins after everyone else stops looking.